Okay, I guess we're at the official top of the hour. So good afternoon in this time zone and welcome. This is basically not a kind of big formal meeting, but just a sync up to try and tee up the session at IETF 119. Nonetheless, I guess the note well is being displayed, so you should note that well, even if the date on the slide is from last year, it still applies. I think we have our session scheduled for Wednesday, first morning session, on which I think is 23:30 UTC, and something 30 horrible for DKG and people in this time zone. I guess we'll send out a call for agenda items to the list after this call, and the main agenda item will be the post quantum work, I guess. Is that correct, DKG? Yep. And I guess we just wanted to have a chat to see where we're at in terms of the threads on that discussion on the list, and just try and tee up anything we need to organize for the session in a few weeks' time. I will be physically present. DKG will not. I'm assuming most other people will not. If you are going to be present physically, that'll be great. Anybody here who is today? I don't think we need to do the queuing too much. People can just jump in, I guess. If it gets too crowded, we can do queuing, but otherwise, just jump in and speak as you think you want to. So who else will be physically in Brisbane? I'm assuming not many, but if you are, maybe mention it in the chat or just say on audio. In particular, if you're liable to be presenting something. So Michael's going to be physically there. Any likely presenters will be there physically? No?
I will not be there physically, only remotely.
Okay, so my sympathies for your evening exploits of the time. I think because of that, we'll probably try and make sure we get slides a bit ahead of time. And if, in particular, if it's going to be me that's there and something breaks and I have to present, if you can make your slides a bit more verbose than normal, that probably is a good plan. Any other ideas for how to make this work a bit better, DKG?
No, I'm not even sure. Excuse me, I have like a frog in my throat. I'm not even sure if the more verbose slides are going to be helpful. I mean, if things break, like you don't have any remote presenters or participants, it might just be you and Michael in the room. So
there is that, but yeah, I mean, I guess the other possibility is that somebody's alarm doesn't go off, and one of the presentations is the only one that's affected.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's a concern. Yeah, I think we need to. I do think we want slides early. I think it's that would be a good thing. So, if, folks who are here who are thinking about the issues that we talked about today might want to, if something comes up where you think this is something that we particularly want to have the full group discussion, I think it would be useful to go ahead and pass us a smallish slide deck. Please don't feel like Stephen's request for making them more verbose means take more time on the slides. Getting the slides earlier as placeholders is probably better.
But I think we do have time because we got rejigged. I think we have a 2-hour slot now. So
right. No, I'm saying don't take a long time to get us the slides. So
oh, yeah, sorry, pardon.
The deck can take a while if you need it to get through a complex topic, but don't delay giving us a heads up. And we can always revise your slides if you decide you want to change them later. So earlier is better.
Okay, and I'm guessing that the main agenda item is post quantum work. We have an adopted draft. We have some threads on the mailing list. I'm assuming the agenda will more or less map to the kind of set of threads that we had on the email list. Does that make sense to people? Again, jump in if you have any thoughts. No need to queue, just say.
So our milestones suggest that we might want to be thinking about adopting a second topic around now. So that might come up as well.
Okay, so we should. So that implies we should, when we send out a call for agenda items, we should have post quantum as the first thing, and what next is another agenda item.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Fair enough, and people can discuss that on the list meantime. And then on the post quantum thing, I think I'm assuming that the breakdown is like which algorithms for chems, that kind of discussion. Then for signatures, and then combiners somehow.
I think we should do chem combiners next to which algorithms for chems, because I think that those discussions are going to get merged, or they're going to reflect on each other, and having a little signature gap in the middle might just make things more confusing.
Okay, so I think it's kind of three subtopics on post quantum, right? Is there anybody has a fourth kind of subtopic on the post quantum stuff that would make sense to have as an agenda item at that level? Davros.
So my question, what I wanted to understand when I asked for this meeting is, I liked the idea of splitting stuff, because I think a modular approach might be beneficial to OpenPGP in the future, as one thought. And the other thought is that we don't have to accommodate every algorithm wish in one draft, I think. But what I would like to understand is if you go for a split, then what kind of status would those documents have? Would let's say we have a core document, would that be still an informational RFC? I suppose so. The splitted documents that are maybe more focused on maybe more niche cases, which are still useful, or maybe for compliance reasons, some further algorithm selections, would they also be informational RFCs, or would that be something different then? I'm trying to understand,
Sure, I would have thought that if we assume the core document defines the must implement things, then I think that would be a proposed standard, not an informational draft, or aiming for proposed standard RFC. For kind of optional to implement algorithm choices, whether we regard them as niche or not is a different thing. But I think they also could be proposed standards. I forget what I think that the IANA registry setup would allow informational documents, but I don't think there's a huge benefit in doing that if we're going to process them through the working group. If somebody was independently coming along and say, here's my other algorithm that I don't want to process through the working group, then they could basically go ahead and do that. At some point, the working group would be asked, what do you think about that? And we would have, participants would have their opinions. But I think if the working group is processing optional documents, having those as proposed standards is just as good and doesn't really add any additional overhead.
Okay.
You still have to do the working group last call, the IETF last call, ISG processing. It's all the same, basically.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
So, yeah, but I would imagine though that the ways of splitting the work into multiple drafts would be a kind of part of the conclusions we would hope to reach at the session or on the list afterwards if we don't get to do that at the session.
But if I may add one aspect, we should, I don't know, it's just an idea, yeah? The working group maybe should try to avoid a cascade of, a split here and split there, another split, another split, another split, right? So if you have a collection of algorithms that you would like to propose, then you should have some reasons why this is a good idea in OpenPGP. For example, I guess you all followed the discussion about, for example, classic McAleese. Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah. Kids, sorry. And I tried to explain on the mailing list that we proposed it at the summit, and people were a little bit. It was a little bit controversial. Oh yes, it's nice, but maybe it doesn't fit our key service and so on. So people should have some reason, maybe.
Sure. I mean, yeah. I mean,
So you would maybe need to define some standards or some criteria so that this algorithm makes sense to be proposed to the OpenPGP working group.
So
Yeah.
the registration policies for this registry, we have just recently relaxed to be specification required. So if someone wants to specify a ROT 13 standard and it's well documented and the designated experts are willing to sign off on it, I would like to think that we wouldn't agree on having ROT 13. But if someone has something that somebody else thinks, oh, that's a bad idea because it doesn't fit on the key servers or something, the answer might well be, well, okay, these are keys you don't put on the key servers, right? And key servers decide to not implement them. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we wouldn't do a code point allocation for them. There's just a corner that wouldn't be there. If we want to pass the document through the working group, that's a different story, right? The working group is free to say we won't work on the Route 13 case.
Okay.
But yeah, so I think I kind of agree with you, Stavros, though, that if we're going to split the work, there should be some logical basis for the split. I would imagine that the kind of if we want to call it the core document or whatever, the thing that specifies all the most implements would that should be complete, I would think. So it would specify chems and combiners and signatures that are most, and then the separate documents, if we do split into separate things, it might be there's a brain pool one, there's a more NIST one, a specialized algorithms one, whatever. And I think so one of the things we need to do also is to recommend people to be designated experts for the IESG. The IESG picked those, but they would like to get some recommendations from us. So I guess it would be no harm if people who are interested in carrying out that role would drop a mail to the chairs saying, I'd be willing to do that. But it's up to the IESG to appoint those people. And typically, if they get a request for a code point and the specification document is an internet draft, then I would expect that the working group would be at some point asked about it. What do they think? Either by the designated expert or by somebody as this draft proceeds towards being some kind of ROC. So typically the working group will get a chance to chime in. And I don't think we'd be expecting hundreds of code point requests for any of these registries anyway.
Okay, thanks.
I hope we won't get hundreds because the code point registries are mostly 1-octet registries.
Well, we can get hundreds, but then there'll be a lot of no answers. So,
right.
Okay, so I think we're sketching out an agenda there where we have like 3 kind of technical things and maybe a how to split thing as the agenda items for discussing post-quantum, then a what next for other work items agenda item. Do we have people who want to take the lead in presenting any of those topics? I'm hoping the answer will be yes. So we have it doesn't have to be split this way in terms of presenters, but we have the chems, combiners, signatures, those 3 things. Does anybody want to jump up and say, I'll do the slides?
I can take care of presenting these topics. I mean, accordingly with the other editors, if they agree.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, go on.
Aaron.
Thank you.
Okay, good. So we're looking for basically one slide deck, if you like, to cover all those. Basically, I presume it'll kind of say, here's what's in the draft, here's the discussion on the list, and here's some things to talk about for each of those, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I think I still need to send out a thread for chem combiners, and I will do this as soon as possible. And the question is at this point for the feedback that we already collected, should we action anything before the cutoff that is on the 4th, if I recall correctly?
My take on it.
Go ahead.
My take on it is that it would not be unreasonable for the editors to submit a new draft that matches the state of sort of what you're thinking, with the understanding that the new draft might not, that any decisions made for that new draft might not be permanent. I think that actually having a new draft will make some of the discussion more concrete. If you say, we think we're heading in this way, and it, you know, I mean, Stephen, tell me if you think this is a bad process, but having a new draft before the cutoff, which is Monday, will give people who are coming up to speed, they gives them a chance to read a diff if they want to read a diff, and you know, if the meeting just comes and says, "Oh my God, I can't believe you made those changes," then you can release a new draft afterwards if those changes reverted.
Yeah, no. So I think the having a new draft that reflects the discussion about the TBD code points, just to include a note saying the previous draft had these numbers, but don't do that. I think that would be valuable, just in case it lasts 6 more months. But I don't think it will. But I think that would be useful. I would not attempt to split the document into multiples at this stage. So I think submitting one new draft with some new information, notes that are stuff that was mentioned on the list, that would be welcome. I think, sure, but I wouldn't try and split it into multiple documents at this point.
Okay, because that was exactly my question. Like, we have right now already applied the changes of TBD and so on in the GitHub repo. So the idea would be take the GitHub repo as it is right now and just publish it pretty much with few additional things without attempting to split.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
And as you think appropriate, if there's points that were made on the mailing list you think worth including as a note or as a question to be addressed or whatever.
Okay.
If there's something like that would be useful in the draft itself, great, put it in. But there's issue tracking things going on as well, so you don't have to. Not everything has to be a note in the draft.
Okay, and so then we would basically collect for another 3 weeks feedback onto the camp combiners-ish, let's say. That is till the IETF, I guess, 3 weeks from now.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm not sure where that discussion is going to land. I don't know if anybody has better insight into what they think is the future will be for combiners, but I don't. So.
I mean, the CFRG looks interesting. Yes.
Oh man, yeah. I think we came up with a reasonable choice of a combiner in OpenPGP, and then now the discussion really took off. Crazy.
Yeah, and I guess that's a thing to talk about. I mean, I presume that will be a topic of discussion across multiple sessions for IETF 119. I think I don't often agree with Mike Unsworth, but I think I agree with him when he made a point that like some protocols like TLS have enough people interested in them to do something special. I think you could argue that's true for PGP as well. You could possibly argue it'd be better in the universe if there was a common way of doing things for PGP and other people who want to combine chems. So that's a discussion that'll.
Yeah. So TLS is kind of special because they were so early out there with PQC, and they tried to sneak that into the regular TLS schedule because they didn't want to touch that. So we don't have. I don't think I'm not an OpenPGP expert. I don't think that we have such obstructions here in OpenPGP. So my opinion, my personal opinion, without asking Aaron or Falco or Johannes in advance, is that OpenPGP should somehow fit into the ecosystem. So we should do something compatible. We have the liberty here, I guess. But still, I think that the choice we came up with is still a very good choice. And maybe just to propose an idea, do we need the discussion about the chem combiner right now? Or do we want maybe to give us a little bit more time, or give the CFRG discussion a little bit more time to evolve, because we still, can adopt what the CFRG comes up with, I think. Aaron Falco, Jonas, what do you think? So I'm not sure if you want, and right now there are a lot of parallel discussions going on in the CFRG. It's a mess. Do you want to attach to that mess with OpenPGP? I think the chem combiner is a detail that can be made compatible at the later stage, if people want, or if there's a need, or
I would like to have a definitive choice, or at least something that is vetted from the community already, but it doesn't look like it's really much of an option right now.
Okay.
I would like not doing anything right now. It like not touching the chem combiner we have right now is definitely the easiest choice because we already have one. Most people who implemented the draft already implemented these chem combiners, so not touching it means doing zero work at the moment. Then clearly, if we need to adapt it to what the CFRG comes up with, we will break everything that is done so far. Like if anyone starts to encrypt data, but I hope until we don't have a definitive code point, we can still do it. Like till we didn't pick, okay, we do 29 is this algorithm, I think we can still change it. I also volunteered at CFRG to do this, like present a little bit the draft of Ownsworth chem combiners that is pretty much the same, actually the same construction we have. Ours is an instantiation of this kind of generic combiner. And I hope to get somewhere at CFRG with it, but it looks like the drafts are just increasing and the spectrum of the discussion the scope of the discussion is exploding more and more. So I do not know where we'll get there. Where we'll get.
What I was, I think, proposing is not to postpone the discussion to next year, maybe, but maybe to the next IETF, when in the hope of things getting a bit more clearer, and maybe now to focus on what kind of algorithms do we want to propose and how do we want to split, maybe. Because the chem combiner is some kind of a discussion that can be postponed for a couple of weeks, months. Don't open too many battles at the same time. I'm just saying, just proposing. Just a proposal. Aaron, I think I agree with everything you said.
I think I can also imagine that it's maybe we can give it some time to see if the scenery clears up a bit. If not, then it's probably not a good idea to delay the PQC, the OpenPGP PQC draft because of that. I think something can be worked out, and I think OpenPGP had some special solutions for other things as well in the past. So I don't think it has to be what CFRG ends up with. But I think at this point, I agree with Stavros. We have so many topics we can clarify. I'm not sure if this is really something that will take so much time in the end, because I don't think people will have too much opinion about it. The algorithm selection, people will have opinion, but chem combiner, I'm not sure.
I think I would disagree.
Me too. After looking at CFRG, like how many people are like, oh yeah, here we hash in 1 extra kilobyte of data that's gonna be impossible on my point of view. It's like, I mean, yes, it looks like the discussion is really, really open there. I do not know whether in the OpenPGP working group would it be as open as in the CFRG, because we have different requirements on the protocol level. Like, I don't think that hashing in 1 kilobyte of data anywhere would cost anything to OpenPGP. But the question is more like, at this point, Stavros, would you recommend not to send a thread out now for the chem combiners and wait until the CFRG test has a little bit settled? Or would you still throw it out now? At least we collect feedback into the working group so that we can also show up with, okay, the OpenPGP working group has this opinion, but without changing yet anything into the draft.
I think what I would do personally is to send out a message, but saying that we will postpone the chem combiner discussion, as it is a very special element in this encryption process that we are defining now with post-quantum, to collect the opinion of the community and to summarize it the next IETF, and to focus right now on those two important topics, what kind of algorithms should we define as a core, and which kind of algorithms people are also interested in.
So
To explain to the community, this decision of
yeah.
focusing first and then going to the next topic, to sort it out.
I mean, I guess the one of the issues with that Chem Combiner discussion is how to try and not make it hard for library implementers. And I think I would encourage starting that thread, because it may be that the set of relevant implementations and libraries used for OpenPGP is not the same as used for other protocols. So I don't know how much common code there is for I don't know, SMIME versus PGP implementations at that level. So it may be that the set of things that influence decisions are different in the context of PGP versus in the context of other IETF working groups that will be combining things. So yeah, but as you say, I think it's also it would be good in starting that thread to also say, this is a widely active discussion in CFRG. God knows where that's going to land. God knows how long it will take. But it's it's happening. And I mean, the only other thing I'd say is, I guess if CFRG do come up with some guidelines as to here's a bad thing to do or here's a good thing to do, then we probably want to be cognizant of those. But again, that might take months. It might not happen before the summer, before they land on something. So I don't know if waiting till the summer will get you an output from CFRG.
Oh, I think I would focus on the positive aspect of it will get us an output for the algorithm selection a little bit quicker, because we don't blur this discussion with another topic that is behaving very wild. It's like a random walk in some space of mailing lists.
Yeah, but stuff happens.
This is the only motivation, to focus on the other stuff and maybe let this go randomly walking on its own for a while.
I think it might just take as long. If you wait, you might. If it's going to take us n months to land on the working group's consensus answer on Chem Combiners, I think if you wait some months before CFRG, it'll still take n months. So I expect going ahead now is maybe better.
You also want people to be paying attention to what's happening in the CFRG, and this can be a way to sort of drive that attention. Certainly, as implementers, you'd hope that implementers are at least game to try what's in the current draft and use that to inform their thinking about it. Whereas if you just tell people, we haven't decided on this, don't bother implementing anything yet, you're not going to get the same level of scrutiny that you'd get from implementers who have at least gone through one implementation and said, okay, this worked for me, this didn't work for me, or it turns out it would be really easy, given the toolkits that I'm depending on, to do some other thing. Right? You want to be able to hear that feedback earlier, just get people conversant with it. Yeah,
and I guess the opposite is true as well. Like, I mean, if somebody implementing PGP says, it's rather hard to do this, but really easy to do this, that's an input that we can provide to CFRG discussion too, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so,
good point. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing is that the CFRG discussion, from what I can see so far, is that there isn't anything that is completely toxic. I mean, other than maybe some of the way that the community talks to each other, but that nobody's like, oh, if you do this thing, you've just burned all of the security that you were expecting. It's that we are in the space, the classic IETF problem space of we're arguing around these little details that don't matter for every single use case, and someone is going to have a particular thing that they particularly like, and if there's a clear and objective thing of this thing is an unsafe thing to do, that makes the problem much easier to decide. The reason it's so hard to decide is that there is no such thing. This is about minute trade-offs in these algorithmic choices that may or may not align in the different use cases. And whether that's protocol-specific use cases or non-protocol-specific use cases, we're going to be fighting about that for a while. And at some point, if you want this thing in the real world, there needs to be a choice made.
Yeah. And it's all that plus a little bit of ego mixed in. But we'll deal with it. Okay, so I think that's So we have a kind of a sketched agenda for the Brisbane session. We have Aaron is going to make a pile of slides in conjunction with the other editors. Likely to, I guess it sounds like you're likely to shoot out another revision of the draft by the next week, in the next week. So that's all good. Is there any other things that we should think about teeing up for this topic for Brisbane timeframe?
The only thing is maybe let's try to keep the discussion list active, because as much feedback as we can get, the better I can then recap it and then try to implement it in the draft. We can try to do that. So because like the CAM combiners received, the CAM thread received way more interest than the signatures so far, seems like. I know that also CAM is more urgent as a problem, and signatures, maybe some people don't want to think about it yet. But I would still argue that it, as we all decided at the adoption call, it makes sense to keep them together in a single draft. So let's focus on both, even if you have opinions that are, I like everything you've done so far, it's perfect, just write a single line on the list. That would be great.
Sure, and I just with my chair hat off, I plan to disagree some more about signatures anyway, so I'll do that the next day or so.
Can I just add one thing that might be useful in terms of the discussion? Justus, Hesse, you're on the call. Do you think that the revised version will actually have a test vector that aligns with a new code point allocation, that we can, something simple like a v6 key with a standard X25519 primary key, or sorry, ED25519 primary key, and then this combiner with a test message, because that would also really help to drive implementers towards thinking about it. And Justus, if that was released, do you think that would be something that could be incorporated into the test suite, or maybe it already is, and I'm just not paying attention?
Sure, absolutely.
As far as I know, so Johannes has prepared already a test vector before. So we have, we're right now testing it out also in other implementations. And that is just a v4 like ECC key with attached to it post-quantum encryption subkey. And v6, as far as understood, the MTG doesn't have an implementation that is fully v6 compliant yet. So, Johannes, please stop.
Yeah, the problem is that we don't have MLDSA yet, so the crypto libraries didn't catch up to that yet. So it's still the lithium, and when we release a test vector, we would like to have the newest standard, I guess.
So I understand you want the newest standard, but you could do a mixed certificate here. Given that Monday is the cutoff deadline, if we can have a test vector in that has, and it doesn't need to have any of the signatures in it, right? It could be traditional signature scheme with a post-quantum encryption key.
So ED25519 plus MLCAM. Like with the primary key ED25519 and MLCAM as subkey, but v6 instead of v4.
That would be a concretely useful thing that would drive people to actually, do the implementation work for the chem combiner stuff. And if people and maybe we'll find out that it doesn't work, or people have some new specific preferences because they did that. This is not going to be the final test vector. This is going to be a test vector that we'll use to drive implementers to pay attention. And certainly, if Justus can integrate that with the test suite, that shows concrete progress. I understand why you want both of the things. You want it to be nice, and for the ultimate RFC, yes, we want it to be a fully PQC thing. But in the spirit of keeping momentum going on this, let's do one that just has the encryption capable subkey, and then an encrypted message that can be decrypted as well.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know whether we'll manage to put it in the text of the draft, but for sure we can put it into some GitHub space, like an issue or a PR or something.
Sure, but if you can get it in the text of the draft, that would be better. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Great. So any other things to talk about in terms of the post-quantum agenda topic in IETF 119? Hearing silence. So that's our main business for today. I guess, as DKJ pointed out, we should ask people, what of the gigantic menu that we had would they like the working group to try address next? I don't know if anybody has something they want to talk about here now on that topic, or.
So I remember that we decided to allow post-quantum algorithms with encryption algorithms with v4 certificates. And I'm wondering if that was a wise decision.
I have strong opinions about this. So I originally was the one proposing to bind it to v6. And since then, I completely changed my mind into I think it's a good idea to allow it with v4. And I can give a little brief overview why I think this is the case. So first of all, I think that this is an opportunistic upgrade. So you can distribute a key that contains a v4 subkey, and implementation who don't understand it could just ignore the subkey. While instead, if we have it's just about having allowing interoperability with older implementation while still having PQC in it. And given the fact that I feel that encryption is way more urgent than signatures, these would allow to transition to v6 to PQC pretty quickly, at least can. And there are several players in the market who are not really ready to move to v6 fully. I am looking, for instance, at Thunderbird. And while giving them a v4 encryption certificate would make it an easy transition, requiring them to bind to v6 probably would make their choice to be, okay, then we don't implement PQC at all.
I mean, I get the urgency, but your argumentation hinges on the fact that you expect existing v4 implementations to continue to function when you attach a PQ subkey to a v4 certificate, and I don't believe that. Whereas if we would say that PQ is a v6 only thing, then there are no v6 implementations out yet. So any v6 implementation that is in the making now should better make sure that it will not choke on any PQ artifacts in the certificate.
Don't implementation right now ignore a key with an algorithm they don't understand, or they completely choke on if they have a subkey with algorithm ID?
Who
29.
knows?
Do you so users just to understand your concerns? Is it just because of breaking existing implementations?
Well, I think it adds complexity, and I don't buy into the smooth upgrade path story.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually think that having PQ in v6 is a great argument for moving to v6.
Mm-hmm.
And
So does that sound like another good subtopic will be transitioning or binding to v4 v6, as well as the algorithm discussions and the combiner discussions. There's another kind of sub bullet on that PQC topic is transition and having some discussion around that. So I think that does sound like it would be useful, yeah, especially if there's multiple ways to skin a cat.
And Aaron, you volunteered to do the 3 points so far, but Justus, if you wanted to raise that discussion, or maybe you don't. I'm not saying that you need to drive it, but if Aaron, we're not saying this that the whole meeting needs to be there and Whisper show. Not that we mind having you present to the extent that you're willing to.
Yeah.
But yeah, just I don't know if that's something that you would want to present, or if you feel like that is an awkward spot to be in, or you don't have the time. But I agree that it would be useful to have that conversation explicitly with the group. You both raise reasonable points.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be late for me, but I can try to come up with a slide or two and, well, try to get a discussion going.
That'd be great.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't want to use PQC as how to say, as a kind of a RAM in V6.
Why not?
I mean, I think signatures are already doing that to a certain extent, but encryption, especially, let's say that I mean, here is only about signatures, not about the SCIPD, right? We're talking about, because if not, you forbid PQC keys from encrypting mixed with V4 keys. That would be bad.
If a PQC key encrypts, if you're making an encryption to a post-quantum key that you're also encrypting to a non-post-quantum key, then the post-quantum benefits of the encryption aren't present, right?
Yeah,
Because
but let's say I publish just a PQC key and just has a how to say a traditional key.
Then you can't make a message to both of them.
That would be not good, in my opinion.
You know, maybe another motivation that I would like to say is that when we came across those ideas, I thought it would be a very good opportunity to start talking to Werner Koch and to give him an upgrade path, you know, to say that, come on, leave V5, V6 discussion at the side. Here you have an upgrade path. You can implement it in V4. That was some benefit that I saw, that I presented as, you know, at least we are doing also something for GNU-PG. But obviously, when you read about his ideas about PQC, this kind of benefit slowly fades away, maybe. But I think, you know, the additional ideas to give implementations that might want to spend a little bit more time to migrate to V6, an upgrade path to PQC, a much smoother one, and to have some kind of intermediate step and then go to V6. I think maybe that was an idea. I don't know.
So I don't think we're going to resolve
just to elaborate on the history a little bit, right? Sorry.
I don't think we're going to resolve this here.
No, we won't.
But I do ask that when folks are thinking about how to present this to the wider group, and when you're making the arguments, that you are clear in your thinking. And I put this in the chat, but be clear whether you're talking about V6 versus V6, like the keys and signature mechanism, or you're talking about the encryption mechanism, which is SCIPD version 1, which is widely implemented, SCIPD version 2, or the draft Koch AEAD packet. And so it's just important that we know what we're talking about in each of these cases. In particular, because the encryption case is very different from the signing case. These are not things that we can reason about clearly in parallel.
Should I make, or should we make a thread for this on the mailing list as well before the IETF?
Where this means transition generally, or in a more specific sense?
I would think in a bit of a more specific sense, like who wants to bind encryption, key version, signatures, encryption to V4, V6, etc.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess I'd say yes, but maybe let's try and not have too many mixed threads at once. So if hopefully we'll have more discussion on the signature thread. You're going to kick off a Chem Combiners thread.
Yep.
You know, again, maybe give that a few days, and then perhaps starting a thread on issues related to transition. It seems like a fine thing to do. There's time, I think, between now and Brisbane.
Okay, so maybe waiting another week and a half from now, like if I launch now the one for Chem Combiners, another 10 days-ish. Okay.
Yeah, something like that would be
Okay.
good. Yeah.
And to make it sure that because I crossed it out on my to-do list here, the transition for V6, just as if you're confident with making the slides, I'm very happily crossing it out, but just to know if I need to do it or not.
So I think Justice has volunteered to do some slides, but I think it's entirely fine that we have different viewpoints on transition or different inputs. So you know, it's if 3 people say here's 3 different ideas for how to do it, then we should discuss them at this point, I think. But yeah, so in other words, cross it out or add it back as you think best is fine. And if we have multiple perspectives on it, that's good.
Okay.
Okay, so as I said in the chat, I'm afraid I have to drop because I've got to go and inflict myself on students, actually on post-quantum crypto as a topic today. But so DKG's happy to stay on, and I'll talk to you on the list and see some of you in Brisbane, or a few of you, and otherwise online. So sorry to have to drop, but I have to do a runner. Bye for now.
So Stephen dropped at sort of a natural ending point here, I think, unless folks have. So I want opportunities if people want to raise any other concerns. Eustace, thanks for bringing that one up. But we also don't need to use the full hour if folks have, if there's no other specific topics that people want to cover.
So if we have some time, so I haven't been following the CFRG discussions going on. Can you quickly summarize what's happening with the Chem Combiners?
I have a bit of a vested interest, but I followed it very closely, if you want. So basically, there was a call for adoption for a set of drafts. So not only the one that, thank you, Stavros, this is a perfect representation of what's happening. But like there was a call for adoption for the draft, for a few drafts together. So a call for adoption for a topic rather than for a draft. And at the beginning, a few people expressed opinions about, like there was the S and True draft from Simon. There was the one from X-Wing. There was also our draft, the one from Stavros, Mike, and I. That is a generic Chem Combiner instead. And basically, they were like, okay, let's try to see if there's interest into this topic. People started arguing a lot about whether one Chem Combiner was better than the other. TLS came in with their opinions as like, if it doesn't fit TLS, it's how to say, it's useless kind of mood. Mike and Lamps came in with silly requirements about RSA in general, like wanting to mix stuff with RSA and other like. The DJB, the Bernstein, came in with very strong opinions about everything. What a surprise and shocking. And then basically the conversation devolved into, I wouldn't say personal attacks, but this far away from it, like kind of, yeah, like discussing how expensive are all the TLS hashing done if you add inside 1 kilobyte of text. If it's millions of dollars or not, there's a thread called millions of dollars, in fact. So the discussion basically went away from the point of, do we want to talk about this, to which Chem Combiner is the best. As DKG said, the problem is the fact that there's no significantly worse one. So all of them have some advantages and disadvantages. Some are more generic, some are more specific, some include copies of the ciphertext, some don't. And then it's all a discussion about the security proof of them and how sleek can it be and how efficient can the computation be. And therefore, the chairs extended the call till the 6th. for further discussion. And they said at the CFRG session, please come up with a 5-minute talk about what you think we should do. And they want to make a design team for yet another draft that is independent from the existing ones, that would encompass the wishes of everyone. Let's say it like this, in a very optimistic way.
Wow, amazing. Thank you.
So, what this raises for us, of course, is that this process is going to be a messy process, and we may at some point decide that we don't want to wait on the resolution of this particularly messy process. Or we may decide that we don't want to wade into it, and by making a decision early, we are effectively, committing ourselves to ignoring some insight that comes out later. So we're gonna have to make a decision as a work group about how to engage there.
Yes, my opinion is that as long as we commit to something that is cryptographically sound, and as long as it doesn't really break our performance model, I think we're fine with it. Like, no discussion on the CFRG came up with this is broken. They all came up, if the attacker has a complete control of the key, the worst thing is the fact that they can reduce in the EC case to 128 bits. If the CAM is broken but not the EC is broken. If the PQ is broken but not the EC is broken, that's the worst thing that came up on the list, and it doesn't even affect the version that we're using right now. So the question I would probably put in the CAM combiner thread also for the working group is everyone fine with what we have right now? A. And B, do we need to over-optimize our CAM combiner in order to omit some artifacts?
When you say over-optimize, you're not putting your thumb on the scale at all there, huh?
I am absolutely having strong opinions about this, yes.
Maybe an aspect that I would like to point out here is, since we are talking about CAM combiners, so I like the X-Wing paper. It's quite well written. There's one non-trivial aspect to it, namely this collision cipher resistance that is special to ML-CAM. And one thought that I have, or one reason that I would have arguing against X-Wing in OpenPGP, or maybe in the core document, for example, would be that I would like the core document to function something like a blueprint. If someone decides at a later point that maybe Classic Make a lease or Entrue or whatever CAM is a good idea for OpenPGP, he could just copy the CAM combiner from there, because it's very generic. It accommodates every CAM as long as it has some kind of minimal requirements. Yeah. So this is one aspect that I have in mind when I think about X-Wing in our proposal. Yeah. So X-Wing would be, for me, an additional algorithm, in fact, for OpenPGP.
Right, but we don't have good signaling mechanisms available for asymmetric crypto in OpenPGP. Right, we don't. So a wide proliferation of things means everybody has to implement all of them, because there's no way to signal that this one's compatible with and that one you're not. So, it's. I get from an implementer's point of view, like, oh, it's nice to just copy this plan. And even from a specifier's view, it's nice to be like, oh, this plan is safe to copy from. We can just do it. But I want to caution against the idea of like, oh, we can just like throw a bunch more algorithms at this, because those have a way of persisting indefinitely into the future. We're still struggling with, people have wanted to deprecate El Gamal, and like, are we successfully deprecating El Gamal at this point? I think the results have been mixed. So,
okay,
yeah, just there's some trade-offs there that don't necessarily align. We'll have to decide.
Right. At the same time, from an implementer's point of view, please use a generic chem combiner. Don't bring PQ algorithms with their own combiners, please.
Yeah, that was our idea, right? So, that
So
you can
those
plug
are
in
those are
chem
the
and
good
use infrastructure.
those are the good preferences to express clearly and simply and ideally non-confrontationally, either on the OpenPGP mailing list or if you're up for wading into the CFRG discussion, being able to say like, hey, as an implementer who's considering this right now, this is my preference, and here's why. It's it's worth putting that out there.
Yeah, one nice aspect about this chem combiner thread, I'm not sure if that's this thread or another thread, is that some guy just said, oh yeah, I take X-Wing and I plug in the MLChem 1000 something, and I have 256 bits of security. I said, no, that's not scalable. And then, the discussion became wild. Aaron, I think you also replied to that guy at some point.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that I find
And-
dangerous sometimes with those optimized, good ideas. Optimized, but not scalable, maybe.
And how to say? Yeah, in general, I also Ilari then kicked into that thread
Yes,
as
this
well.
was the guy.
Yeah.
I didn't want to say
Okay.
anything.
Sorry. My bad. Well, it's public on the mailing list, so it's not a real secret. You can all go look it up. But yeah, I think it's. I think there is the reason why I used the term over-optimized before is clearly, I say, an opinion of mine, but is also the problem, the fact that by creating a generic building block, we ensure that it can be safely be reused without having to retune the security proof for each individual algorithm. That probably would create a specification, exploding specification. Yeah.
But Justus, thank you for the feedback. That's valuable. No, thanks.
I'm also fine with KMac. I think it's not as widely available as HKDF, but well, I think that's the least of our problems with PQ algorithms.
Hi, Aaron.
Oh, okay, hi.
You're muted.
That may have been Meet Echo timing out. Like this was a 1 hour session and we're reminding you that it's almost coming up. I don't know. But it was also a 1 hour session. I don't know. So that gives us there's 2 more minutes left on the hour. If folks have other topics that they want to bring up. I will raise with Meet Echo the fact that all of us had the same experience. Did anybody survive the whatever just happened, or did you all just reconnect? You seem to have fewer
It just reconnected automatically for me after a couple of minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, same here. It actually was very smooth, but it looked like a brief downtime of 10 seconds or so.
Okay. I'll raise that with Meet Echo and just check in on that. But it was also a convenient time to consider closing out the meeting here, since we had it scheduled for an hour.
Very briefly, so we are discussing splitting up the PQ document into several. I'm wondering what the idea is. Are we worried that, is this really reducing the amount of work, or are we optimizing for latency?
So it depends on how the split is done. I think if we take the document and we produce, so the document is currently under working group control. If we take the document and we strip out things from it, and we say the working group we think the working group can reach consensus on these pieces, and we're going to take the other pieces that we pulled out and advance them separately and try to bring them back, that will require another working group adoption for the second piece. So if the goal is getting to the end game where we have all the same algorithms applied, then this may indeed increase the latency somewhat. If the goal is getting to a point where we have a stable specification for some post-quantum crypto in OpenPGP, then this reduces the latency because we don't spend time arguing about the pieces that have been trimmed from this one. So when I hear split, what I'm hearing is we want to narrow our focus, and at the same time, we leave room for the stuff that we shifted out of the narrow focus to come back in a separate process, if that makes sense. So whether we're measuring latency, what you're measuring the latency on is you're gonna get a different answer if there's a split, right? If the latency is what's the time till a functional draft, I think this will reduce the latency. If the question is how long will it take to get everything that's currently in the draft specified, this probably will increase the latency somewhat. And that's a trade-off that the working group is capable of making.
Okay, thank you.
I think that another advantage would be to gauge if there's enough interest into all the various algorithms. So if at a certain point the NIST algorithms are like, okay, no one really cares about them, having the NIST curves there, maybe there's not enough people pushing for them, and therefore they don't get through the working group at all.
Which is a fine outcome, if that's what it turns out to be. People who really want it can step up, and if nobody really wants it, we're not spending time on it. So, all right, we are at the top of the hour. Folks have other commitments. So I think we wrap it up. Thank you for the conversation, and Aaron, thank you for taking on the bulk of the presentation work. Again, get the slides to us as soon as you can. You can submit them through the data tracker. Use this if you're up for submitting slides through the data tracker as well. If you need to update the slides, we can also update them, so don't feel like you're getting locked into anything.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks all. Thank you for the discussion.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.